I'm really happy with the match today. I really had to dig deep. I know that Laura is such a fighter, so I'm happy with my patience.
She walked onto center court as a history maker. She walked off as a legend, not because she won the biggest prize, but because she captured the biggest hearts. For 2 magical weeks, Alexandra Eala had done the impossible. She had become the first Filipino in the open era to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam. She had dismantled the defending champion on center court in a performance that left the tennis world breathless. She had turned a nation of 115 million people into a sea of red, white, and blue that flooded the All England Club. But on a baking hot Monday evening, the dream came to an end. After 2 hours and 22 minutes of gripping tennis, Jasmine Paolini proved just too experienced, too composed, too relentless. The final score, 6-4, 4-6, 6-3, told only part of the story. The rest was written in the tears on center court, the standing ovation from the crowd, and the unshakable pride of a nation that had watched its daughter rise higher than any Filipino had ever risen before. Was this the end of a fairy tale, or just the first chapter of a story that's only just beginning? The roar of center court had barely faded. The sea of red, white, and blue was still vivid in her memory. But on Monday, July 6, 2026, Alexandra Eala walked back onto the most iconic stage in tennis and into the toughest battle of her career. 2 days earlier, she had done the impossible. She had dismantled defending champion Iga Swiatek 7-6-9, 6-2 on center court. The 6-time Grand Slam champion had been left searching for answers, finishing with 44 unforced errors while Eala committed just 21. When the final point landed, Eala had collapsed to the grass in tears, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she had achieved. She became the first player from the Philippines, male or female, to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam in the Open era. But Wimbledon doesn't give you time to breathe. Standing across the net was Jasmine Paolini, the 13th seed from Italy, a 2-time Grand Slam finalist who had been here before, having reached the Wimbledon final in 2024. The 30-year-old Italian had struggled with a foot injury throughout the year, but on this day she was ready. Billie Jean King and Roger Federer watched from the royal box. The pressure was immense. The match was a war from the very first point. Paolini struck first, breaking Eala in the 4th game to seize a 4-1 lead. Eala fought back, breaking the Italian to close the gap to 5-4, but Paolini responded immediately, sealing the opening set 6-4. The second set belonged to Eala. After trading breaks early, the 21-year-old displayed remarkable composure. When Paolini surged to a 0-40 lead on Eala's serve at 4-3, the Filipino reeled off 5 consecutive points to hold, one of the biggest holds of the match. She broke again to take the set 6-4 and force a decider. The center court crowd gave her a standing ovation. But the deciding set was a different story. At 3-3, the match hung in the balance. Then came the fatal moment, a double fault from Eala at precisely the wrong time. Paolini broke for a 5-3 lead. The baking hot center court shimmered under the Monday evening sun. Billie Jean King and Roger Federer watched from the royal box. The sea of Philippine flags stretched across the stands. A nation of 115 million people held its breath. It was the biggest test of Alexandra Eala's young career, and it would be the one that broke her heart. From the very first point, Eala sent a forehand long. It was a sign of things to come. Paolini, the 13th seed and 2024 Wimbledon finalist, was the steadier player throughout. She struck first, breaking Eala's serve in the 8th game of the opening set to seize a 5-3 lead. Eala refused to fold, erasing 2 set points and breaking back to raise hopes of stealing the set. But Paolini immediately responded, sealing the opener 6-4. The second set belonged to Eala. After trading breaks early, the 21-year-old displayed remarkable composure. She reeled off 5 consecutive points to hold serve from 0-40 down. It was the kind of hold that champions build runs on. She confidently served out the set 6-4 to force a decider. The center court crowd roared. But the deciding set was a different story. The momentum swung back and forth. At 3-3, the match hung in the balance. Then came the fatal moment, a double fault from Eala at precisely the wrong time. She conceded a break point with an overhit forehand to fall 5-3 behind. The costly unforced errors proved the difference. Paolini confidently served out the match, securing victory when an Eala return drifted wide. The final score, 6-4, 4-6, 6-3. 2 hours and 22 minutes of gripping tennis that ended the dream. The center court crowd gave Eala a standing ovation as she walked off. She had become the first Filipino in the Open era to reach the 4th round of a major. The final point had been played. The dream had ended. But as Alexandra Eala walked off center court, the crowd rose to its feet. Not a polite, obligatory applause. A genuine, heartfelt, standing ovation from the center court crowd. The same crowd that had witnessed her dismantle the defending champion just 2 days earlier. The same crowd that had seen her fight back from a set down against a 2-time Grand Slam finalist. The same crowd that had fallen in love with a 21-year-old from Quezon City who refused to stop believing. The match commentator described her as a player who is very easy to like. And in that moment, the tennis world agreed. Billie Jean King and Roger Federer watched from the royal box, two of the greatest champions the sport has ever known. They had seen the future of tennis, and it was wearing a smile from the Philippines. The tennis community rallied around Eala in defeat. The Rafa Nadal Academy, where she had trained since she was 13 years old, posted a tribute to its standout graduate. "So proud of you, Alexandra Eala. Keep shining. The best is yet to come." Vamos, Wimbledon itself honored her with a Tagalog social media post. "Sino bang hindi mabibigyan performance na yun ni Alex?" Who wouldn't be captivated by Alex's performance? The post drew positive reactions from Filipino fans, who welcomed the tournament's use of their language in celebrating their hero. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. posted a message that captured the sentiment of an entire nation. "This remarkable Wimbledon run may have come to an end. But after what you have accomplished, I believe the world has only begun to see what Filipinos are capable of," he added. "Thank you, Alex Eala, for proving that no dream is beyond the reach of a Filipino who dares to..." The tears on center court had barely dried. But in the quiet of the press conference room, Alex Eala sat before the world, not with regret but with clarity. The defeat had been heartbreaking. 2 hours and 21 minutes of gripping tennis had ended with a long forehand drifting wide. But when the questions came, the 21-year-old didn't make excuses. She didn't dwell on what went wrong. Instead, she did something that left the room in awe. She spoke with a maturity far beyond her years. "It was a really challenging match today," she said, her voice steady. "Jasmine played great. I gave everything that I could. I did everything that I could do today, so I'm proud of that. I have to be proud of what I've achieved this week. I'm leaving with positive thoughts. There are so many positives." She spoke of the pressure that had weighed on her shoulders, the weight of a nation, the expectations of 115 million people, the sea of red, white and blue that had filled center court. And she spoke of how she had handled it. "One thing I think is how I've handled pressure. The more you want to win, the pressure goes along with that. I'm happy how I faced it head on. I think I kept cool when I needed to, controlled my emotions, and overall performed the best that I could that day." But Eala was honest about where she needed to grow. Her serve hadn't been at its best. There were areas she wished she had executed better. "Everyone has days when they don't play their best tennis," she admitted. "I don't expect to be playing the best tennis of my life every single day. There are so many external factors that you cannot control," she said, her words carrying a wisdom that belied her age. "The only thing I can control is how I approach those situations. If I'm able to approach them with bravery, with a steady mind, and with intensity, then I'm able to look back and feel no regret." She left London not with her head hung low, but with her head held high. "I have to be proud of what I've achieved this week," she said. The warrior had spoken. The dreamer had arrived. And the world had seen a 21-year-old who had just won the hearts of millions, not just with her tennis, but with her grace.
Alexandra Eala, meine Damen und Herren.
And I say, hey.
The tears on center court had dried. The crowds had dispersed. But the legacy of Alex Eala's Wimbledon run was only just beginning to take shape. She had done what no Filipino had done in 73 years. She had reached the 4th round of a Grand Slam, the first since Felicissimo Ampon at the 1953 French Open. She had defeated the defending champion and a 2-time Grand Slam finalist on the way. She had secured at least £300,000 (P24 million) in prize money. And she had done it all on the biggest stage in tennis. But for Eala, the numbers were just numbers. What mattered was the impact she was having on her country, on the children who would grow up watching her highlights, on the families who had stayed up late into the night to cheer her on a nation that had found something to believe in. The impact was already being felt. In the Philippines, tennis courts that had once sat empty were suddenly filled with children holding rackets. Parents who had never watched tennis were now glued to their screens. A nation that had once looked to boxing and basketball for heroes had found a new source of pride. "I hope they have bigger dreams than winning a Grand Slam," Eala had said after her victory over Swiatek. "I don't want them to be the next me. I want them to be the first them." The words were simple, profound. And they revealed a young woman who understood that true greatness isn't about being copied. It's about inspiring others to find their own path. Eala had proven that she could compete with the best in the world. She had beaten Swiatek twice. She had beaten Rybakina and Svitolina on grass in Berlin. She had won the Birmingham Open and reached the Berlin semifinals. She had carried a 12-3 record on grass into the fourth round. She was no longer just a promising young player, she was a genuine contender. And as she walked off center court, through the sea of red, white, and blue that had carried her through every match, she carried with her the knowledge that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. I'm leaving with positive thoughts. There are so many positives, she had said. The warrior had spoken. The dreamer had arrived. And the legacy of Alex Eala was only just beginning. She walked onto center court as a history maker. She walked off as a legend, not because she won the biggest prize, but because she captured the biggest hearts. For 2 magical weeks, Alexandra Eala had done the impossible. She had become the first Filipino in the Open era to reach the 4th round of a Grand Slam. She had dismantled the defending champion on center court, in a performance that left the tennis world breathless. She had turned a nation of 115 million people into a sea of red, white, and blue that flooded the All England Club. But on a baking hot Monday evening, the dream came to an end. After 2 hours and 22 minutes of gripping tennis, Jasmine Paolini proved just too experienced, too composed, too relentless. The final 6-4, 4-6, 6-3 told only part of the story. The rest was written in the tears on center court, the standing ovation from the crowd, and the unshakable pride of a nation that had watched its daughter rise higher than any Filipino had ever risen before. I have to be proud of what I've achieved this week, Eala said afterward. I'm leaving with positive thoughts. There are so many positives. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. captured the sentiment of an entire nation. This remarkable Wimbledon run may have come to an end. But after what you have accomplished, I believe the world has only begun to see what Filipinos are capable of. Eala had lost the match, but she had won something far more valuable. The respect of the tennis world, the admiration of a nation, the knowledge that she had just experienced one of the best weeks of her life, and she was leaving London with her head held high. I hope they have bigger dreams than winning a Grand